Ever get about ditching the 9 to 5? Like maybe starting a side hustle, something that could actually bring in some real cash.
It's a common dream.
It is, right? Well, today's deep dive might give you the push you need.
Oh, what have we got?
So we're looking at this YouTube video about this 17-year-old Adriel who made over $15,000 using a 3D printer.
Wait, 15,000? A 17-year-old?
Yeah, pretty impressive, right? Like, he probably hasn't even graduated high school yet.
That's amazing. 3D printing really is becoming more and more accessible.
Exactly. So we're going to break down how he did it, what you need to know to get started, and hopefully inspire you to, explore the world of 3D printing a little bit. What do you think?
Sounds like a plan. I'm always fascinated by stories like Adriel's. It's not just about the tech itself. It's about finding creative solutions to everyday problems.
Totally. And his approach was so smart. He had this, two-pronged strategy for his business. First, he realized that people were always struggling to find replacement parts for, broken appliances or gadgets, you name it.
I feel that. How many times have you thrown something away because you couldn't find the right part?
Right. So frustrating. So Adriel starts offering custom 3D printing services. Imagine you need a specific knob for your vintage record player or a tiny gear for your drone.
Those aren't things you can just buy at the store.
Exactly. So he tapped into this niche market where people were willing to pay a premium for custom-made parts that they couldn't find anywhere else.
He became the go-to solution. Brilliant.
Right. Okay, but now here's my question. Wouldn't you need, some serious design skills to pull that off? I mean, I can barely draw a stick figure.
That's the beauty of 3D printing. There's tons of software out there, free and paid, and a lot of it is surprisingly user-friendly. You don't have to be a CAD expert to get started.
Oh, okay, so it's not as intimidating as it sounds.
Not at all. Plus, there are tons of pre-designed models online, things you can modify or adapt for your needs. Think of it like building with digital Legos.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. But what about the 3D printer itself? Aren't those things super expensive?
You'd be surprised. Adriel actually started with a very basic 3D printer. Only cost him $160. Shows that you don't need a top-of-the-line machine to, get started and test the waters.
Wow, $160. That's less than I thought. So what are the ongoing costs? What do you need to keep buying?
The main thing is filament.
Filament?
Yeah, it's the material the 3D printer uses. Basically, a plastic thread that comes on spools. It melts as the printer builds the object.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, you've got electricity. But overall, overhead is pretty low.
That's good to know. Okay, so for someone like me, someone who's a total newbie, is this something I could realistically learn?
Absolutely. Adriel actually learned everything he knows from YouTube. There are whole channels dedicated to teaching you the basics, from setting up the printer to designing and printing your first object.
So it's like having a personal tutor. That's awesome. Okay, so we've covered the custom parts side of his business, but didn't he also do something with personalized marketing?
Right. That was his second strategy, all about volume. He realized businesses are always looking for unique promotional items. So he starts offering 3D printed keychains with company logos, names, even phone numbers.
Oh, right. I've seen those.
Relatively simple objects to design and print, and you can produce them in large batches quickly.
So the profit comes from the quantity, even if each keychain doesn't cost that much.
Exactly. He mentioned doing orders of 1,000 keychains at a time. Imagine the profit on that.
That's a lot of keychains. Okay, that makes sense. But wasn't he worried about competition? What if other people in his town started doing the same thing?
That's a great question, and it brings us to one of the most important parts of Adriel's success. His marketing.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, Adriel was smart enough to understand that even in a small town, visibility is key.
So he wasn't just relying on, word of mouth?
Not at all. He used this clever combination of online and offline marketing techniques.
So what did his marketing strategy actually look like? Give us the juicy details.
Well, first of all, he set up a Google business profile, for his 3D printing services.
Smart move?
Right. And this was huge, especially because he was in a small town, not much competition.
Yeah, makes sense.
So whenever anyone in his area searched for 3D printing or, custom parts, boom, Adriel's business popped up at the top of the results.
So he was dominating the market before anyone even knew it existed. I bet that got him tons of leads.
Exactly. But he didn't stop there.
Oh, there's more.
He knew to build a successful business, you got to be proactive.
So he wasn't just sitting back and waiting for customers to magically appear online?
Nope. Adriel took a more old school approach.
Old school? Like what? Fax machines? Pagers?
No, but he started cold calling local businesses. He'd introduce himself, explain his services, and then offer to create custom promotional items, like these keychains we talked about.
Wow, that takes some serious guts. I can barely order pizza over the phone. But I guess that's what separates the entrepreneurs from the rest of us.
It does take courage. But Adriel had another trick up his sleeve, too.
Oh, what's that?
Free samples.
Ah, that's smart. So businesses could see the quality of his work up front. And hey, everyone loves free stuff, right?
Right. Total win-win. The business got a tangible example of what he could do, and Adriel got his foot in the door.
Love it. Okay, so we talked earlier about how we started with that, budget-friendly 3D printer, but I'm guessing he didn't stick with that forever, right?
You're right. As his business grew and he started taking on more complex projects, he knew he needed to upgrade his equipment.
Did he just go out and buy the most expensive 3D printer he could find?
Well, not exactly. There was a bit of trial and error involved. At first, he thought the answer was just buying more of the cheaper printers.
So he could print multiple things at the same time. I mean, more printers equals more output equals more profits, right?
Sounds logical, yeah. But he quickly learned that quality matters more than quantity.
Oh, so the cheaper printers weren't cutting it.
The cheaper ones, while affordable, didn't always deliver the level of detail and precision he needed, for some of the more intricate designs.
So what did he do?
He actually ended up selling a few of the cheaper printers, and then he invested in one single high-quality 3D printer. It cost him around $1,000.
Okay. And that one was better.
Much better, offered a good balance of speed, precision, and reliability.
Good lesson there for any aspiring entrepreneurs. Sometimes it's better to invest in a few key pieces of high-quality equipment rather than, spreading yourself too thin with a bunch of cheaper options that might not be as reliable.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding your needs and your budget and making strategic decisions that will help you in the long run.
So we've talked a lot about Adriel's journey and the steps he took to build his business, but are there any specific types of 3D printers you'd recommend for someone just starting out?
Well, Adriel himself actually recommended a brand called Bamble Up.
Bamble Up.
Yeah, they're known for being beginner-friendly, and they offer a good balance of features and affordability. But beyond a specific brand, there are a few things to think about when choosing a 3D printer.
Okay, like what?
First, think about what you'll actually be using it for. If you're just starting out, just experimenting with basic designs, a simple model might be all you need.
Makes sense.
But if you're planning on doing more complex stuff, like bigger objects, then you'll need one with a larger build volume and more features.
Okay, got it. What else?
The types of materials you want to print with. Different printers are compatible with different types of filament.
Filament, right.
Some can only handle basic PLA plastic. Others can do more exotic things like wood-filled filament, metal-infused, even flexible filaments.
Whoa, there's so many options. It's like opening a whole new world. Okay, but now I have a really basic question. How does 3D printing actually work? Can you break it down for us non-techie folks?
Of course. It might seem like magic, but the concept is pretty simple. Imagine building a sculpture, right? But instead of molding it by hand, you're using a computer-controlled machine to add the material layer by layer.
So, like stacking digital pancakes to create a 3D object.
That's a great analogy. You start with a 3D model, digital. This model gets sliced into hundreds, sometimes thousands of thin layers by a software called a slicer.
A slicer. Okay, so what happens next?
The slicer sends these instructions to the printer. The printer heats up the filament and extrudes it through a tiny little nozzle.
Like a hot glue gun.
Kind of, and the nozzle moves very precisely following the instructions from the slicer, so it deposits the molten plastic onto a build platform.
So it's like drawing with hot plastic.
Exactly. It builds the object layer by layer, starting from the bottom. Each layer cools and solidifies, bonding to the one below it.
So as it adds more layers, the object takes shape. That's pretty amazing.
It is, right? And once it's done, you just remove it from the platform, and then you have a real physical version of your design.
Okay, that makes sense. You mentioned earlier there are different types of 3D printers. What are some of the most common ones?
One of the most popular is called fused deposition modeling, FDM for short.
And that's the one Adriel was using, right? The one that melts the plastic filament.
That's the one. They're pretty affordable and user-friendly. Makes them good for beginners.
Makes sense?
But there are other types of technologies out there too, each with their pros and cons.
Like what? What else is there?
Another common one is stereolithography, or SLA.
SLA, okay.
They use liquid resin, and it gets cured by a UV laser.
Fancy.
Right, it's known for producing really detailed and smooth objects, but the materials can be pricey, and you have to handle them carefully.
So if you're going for crazy high resolution, SLA is the way to go.
Exactly, and there are even more advanced technologies being developed all the time.
It's crazy to think about the potential. We've talked about custom parts, promo items, but I bet there are tons of other uses we haven't even thought of.
Oh, absolutely. 3D printing is used in everything. Medicine, aerospace, fashion, you name it.
It's like we're at the beginning of a whole new industrial revolution. But are there, any challenges, any downsides to 3D printing we should be aware of? It can't be all perfect, right?
Well, no technology is perfect. One thing to consider is scale.
What do you mean?
3D printing is great for prototypes, custom parts, small batches, but It's not always the most efficient for mass production.
So if you're making thousands of the same thing, traditional manufacturing is probably still better?
Probably, yeah. And another thing is durability.
Oh, right.
3D printed objects sometimes aren't as strong as those made using traditional methods.
So you probably wouldn't want a 3D print a bridge or a skyscraper. At least not yet.
Right. But hey, as the technology keeps evolving, who knows what the future holds? We might see 3D printing being used for bigger and bolder things.
This has been so interesting. My mind is buzzing with all these possibilities. I can't wait to see what else we uncover. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Explored how Adriel built his business, learned about different printers, materials, even how the tech works. But I gotta ask, for someone listening who's like totally inspired by Adriel's story, but maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed, where do they even start?
It's totally normal to feel that way. There's so much potential with 3D printing. Sometimes too many choices can be kind of paralyzing.
Right, too many options.
Exactly. The key is to start small. Focus on your interests. What are you passionate about? What problems do you see around you that maybe 3D printing could help solve?
So it's not just about like finding a profitable niche. It's about finding something that you actually care about.
Absolutely. Passion is a powerful motivator, especially when you're just starting out. If you're genuinely excited about what you're creating, it'll show in your work and the whole journey will be way more rewarding.
Okay, I love that. So let's say our listener has found that niche. They're all fired up. What's the next step?
Research, see what's already out there, look at what other creators are doing in that space, and try to spot any gaps or opportunities that you could, jump into.
There's got to be tons of info online, right?
Friends, there are so many online communities and forums all about 3D printing. You'll find a wealth of information and inspiration.
So dive down those rabbit holes, learn everything you can.
Exactly. The more you learn, the better prepared you'll be. Oh, and don't be shy about reaching out to other creators. Ask questions. The 3D printing community is pretty awesome. They're really welcoming and supportive.
That's always good to hear. Okay, so our listener has done their homework. They've got a niche. Maybe they're even like playing around with some designs. What about turning it into an actual business? What advice would you give there?
I'd say don't be afraid to start small. Test the waters. You don't need to spend a ton of money on fancy equipment or loads of inventory right away.
Okay, so take it slow.
Yeah, create a few prototypes, share them with friends and family, get feedback, see if people are even interested.
So like a soft launch before going all in.
Exactly. It's a low-risk way to, gauge demand, refine your ideas before investing a bunch of time or money. And then once you start getting some positive responses, you can think about scaling up, maybe exploring different ways to sell.
So how do you actually sell 3D printed stuff? What are the best ways?
Well, we know Adriel had success with his Google business profile, right? Great for local visibility, but there are online marketplaces too, like Etsy, Shopify. Those are good for handmade and custom items.
Right, right.
And social media, of course, Instagram, TikTok, they're great for showcasing your work, connecting with potential customers.
So it's not one size fits all, really. It's finding the right mix for you and what you're making.
Exactly. And don't underestimate good old-fashioned networking. Go to craft fairs, maker events, conferences. You never know who you'll meet or what opportunities might pop up.
This has been awesome. I feel like I've learned so much about 3D printing. It's really incredible what people are doing.
It really is a game changer. And like we said, we're really just at the beginning. Who knows what amazing things are coming next?
So for our listener who's, maybe thinking about diving into the world of 3D printing, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Don't be afraid to experiment, to learn, and yeah, even to fail sometimes. Embrace the whole journey. Have fun with it. Never stop exploring. The world of 3D printing is waiting.
I love it. That's a fantastic note to end on. So if you're ready to turn your creative ideas into reality, 3D printing might just be the ticket. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another exciting exploration. See ya. CTETA.